All right, welcome to our monthly meeting for July 2025. So first off, you can save the date. Our next monthly meeting will be on Tuesday, August 5th at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern time. That's the next first Tuesday of the month. And I just can't believe it's July now and we're talking about August. It's just
Right.
time really changes. I feel like as you get older, it just feels like it speeds up and speeds up. Um, so we got that. Our exercise of the month is working in half kneeling. So this is last month was breath work, and I think everybody loves breath work. I don't know anybody who doesn't like doing that. Half kneeling is a challenging position to get in. So we're going from something that's highly enjoyable and kind of low effort to something that is much more high effort. May not be your favorite thing to do, but is so powerful in terms of getting stronger, improving on balance, improving in balance, and being in a really good position that is safe to do it. So I will send out the YouTube links for the videos in tomorrow's daily email. So you can watch this video that Maddie made. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but basically she's going to show like we are going to practice getting into half kneeling, which is this position. So like you take a step forward. And so this is considered half kneeling. We can do variations of power moves here. We can stretch. Then we can also lift up, do a power up, and do other exercises kind of up in that high version of the half kneeling. So we're basically going to be getting into the position, building our endurance, building our strength and our balance, and then adding on exercises in that position. And then also working on transitioning from like one side to another, or from half kneeling to full kneeling, half kneeling up to standing. So you can go from this position, you can go down or you can go up. So there's just really endless opportunities. Oh, there she's lifting up the back leg, which is a really great stretch and strengthening exercise as well. So yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to be tough, but we're really going to feel the difference by the end of the month. So get excited about it. Next, our member highlight is Peggy, who Peggy is one of our online members. She lives in Washington, but has her daughter lives down here. And so she comes down here to visit her daughter. She has a new grandbaby now as of January. And so that was the first time she was a member here in person is she came down for 6 weeks when the baby was first born and she joined us in person then. She's staying as an online member since then. She's showing up live. So a lot of you maybe have seen her. And then, I think she's going to be visiting pretty regularly to see her daughter and her granddaughter. And so whenever she comes into town, she will come and exercise with us in person as well. And she is extremely inspiring. She is one of those people who likes to do marathons and had set a goal. I don't know exactly how long ago, but a while, like years and years ago, that she wanted to do a marathon in every state. And I think she was about halfway through that when she was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and she persevered and did another, like, I think close to 20 marathons with the diagnosis of Parkinson's. And I think just completed that goal last year. So very inspiring to hear, to set a goal. Set a goal doesn't always have to be so ambitious, like a marathon in every state, but setting goals makes a difference in our lives. So setting goals, working towards it, meeting that goal, persevering through challenges that may come up along the way. Maybe you already have a diagnosis of Parkinson's, but there's something else that could pop up in the midst of working on a goal. So I highly recommend watching her video. The other thing that is cool is she wrote a chapter in a book. So there is a new book that just came out in May called Sports, Exercise, and Slowing the Progression of Parkinson's. It is a collection of personal stories and research. So we just ordered our copy. I haven't gotten it yet, but she wrote a chapter for this book, and then quite a few other people did. So I think it's going to be, another inspiring book that is kind of a combination of the research and people's positive experiences with exercise. That is another thing that really can motivate us all to do the thing that is good for us. So this book is available on Amazon and probably elsewhere. So I highly recommend getting it if you think that you would be inspired reading it. Our research highlight for this month. So last month, I talked about a review article published by Spielman et al. In like 2011, a long time ago. that lists all the different ways that physical activity and exercise can help people with Parkinson's. And actually not all the ways. They list 10 ways. I would say there's way more than 10 ways that it can be helpful. But they talk about improving bone density, which we talked about recently, reducing risk of cardiovascular events, improved digestion, improved sleep. So some of the things they talk about improving are things directly related to Parkinson's. Some are things that may be kind of comorbidities or maybe have an increased risk because of the inactivity that typically comes along with Parkinson's. And two of the things they talked about was improved medication. I don't remember exactly what said. And so, basically that medication utilization is improved. And then they also talked about how it actually helps kind of the dopaminergic system in the brain, like neuroplasticity. And so that reminded me of these. There's a few articles published from the same group in Italy that are some of the coolest articles and how they look at the interaction of exercise and medication together, because that is something that I get questions about all the time. And my experience is that medication and exercise have a very symbiotic relationship, and adequate medication is very important for being able to exercise well. And then the better you're able to exercise, the better your medication works. And then that is both a short-term benefit and also can end up being a really long-term benefit. So, people who are exercising consistently are often able to keep their dose the same over longer periods of time. And that's one of the biggest challenges with medication with Parkinson's, is that for most people, they experience a change in effectiveness over time. And it's not because the medication stops working, but it does work differently as Parkinson's progresses. So this month, August, and probably even, I'm trying to think of exactly how many articles they have looking at this, but I wanted to cover one each month. So this one is looking at an intensive rehabilitation treatment in people with Parkinson's who have dyskinesia. So they did a study with a 6-month follow-up. So in the abstract, they talk about how a major adverse effect of levodopa is the development of dyskinesia, which affects 30 to 40% of chronically treated people. So this I also thought was important, because the way that people can be fearful of dyskinesia, you would think that it's something that everyone gets. Not everyone gets dyskinesia. And so a lot of people are afraid to start treatment, to try it, to use it, because they're worried about having dyskinesia. And here, the majority of people actually do not get dyskinesia. And then if it is something that you experience, though, then it is something that is manageable. So you can make medication adjustments. There are other treatment options. There's medications that can help minimize it. So again, it's just not something to be afraid of. And you don't want to under-medicate yourself, restricting yourself from being able to exercise well because you're afraid of something that happens in only 30 to 40% of people. And especially if you're exercising, eating healthy, exercising, all of those things are going to minimize your risk of experiencing dyskinesia, and especially bothersome dyskinesia. So they hypothesized that our rehabilitation protocol might allow a reduction in levodopa dosage without worsening motor performances, thus reducing frequency and severity of dyskinesias. So 10 people with Parkinson's, it was a small study. They underwent a 4-week intensive rehabilitation treatment. They were evaluated at baseline, at the end of rehabilitation treatment, at the end of that month, and at a 6-month follow-up. Outcome measures were the UPDRS, which is the test that neurologists do to test symptoms, section 2, 3, and 4, and the abnormal involuntary movement scale. So that's a measurement developed specifically to measure dyskinesia. At the end of this intensive rehabilitation treatment, levodopa dosage was significantly reduced, going from people were on average levodopa equivalent of 1,016 plus or minus 300, so a range of 700 or 600 and some up to 1,300 and some, down to 777 plus or minus 333. So that is like a 25% reduction. It's pretty great. All outcome variables improved significantly by the end of the intensive rehabilitation treatment. At follow-up, all variables still maintained better values with respect to admission. So people were still doing better 6 months later than when they started. And this is something like I've been talking to multiple people recently, and like we did their assessment and they're like, I'm better. And they're like, that's not supposed to be possible. And I'm like, yes, even if Parkinson's is progressing by definition, that doesn't mean that you can't get better. You can get stronger. You can improve your balance. You can improve your endurance. And we may be actually changing Parkinson's. We just, trajectory, we just don't 100% know that, but it is absolutely possible to get better. And that is super important for people to know. We have a member that we work with who's pretty young. He's like in early 60s. He's an anesthesiologist still working. And his first visit with a neurologist, he was told, this is the best you'll ever feel. And that was very upsetting to him because he did not feel very good at the time. Luckily, he didn't listen to that neurologist and has been exercising, made changes to his diet, and he's actually feeling better now than he did like in his 40s. So that is really cool to hear. And so this article, I think if you asked most neurologists, is it possible to change my medication through exercise? I think a lot of doctors would say no. And I think it's partially because they don't know about research like this. I think it's because they haven't seen anyone do it. But unfortunately, they're, the ones that kind of have the most authority in this situation, and they don't have all the information. So people got better, and so they got better and they were on less medication. Both of those things. They didn't just get better with the same amount of medication. They got better on less medication. This is a really big deal. Let's see. In particular, so the AIMS score improved, going from an 11.9 down to 3.1, and 11.9 with a bigger standard deviation. And then at, admission to discharge down to 3.1 plus or minus 2.3. And then it went up a little bit. It went up basically 1 point, but it was reduced by like 75%, and then went up by not even 20%. So that is very cool. Our results suggest that it is possible to act on dyskinesias in Parkinsonian patients with properly designed rehabilitation protocols. Intensive rehabilitation treatment, whose acute beneficial effects are maintained over time, might be considered a valid non-invasive therapeutic support of Parkinsonian patients suffering from dyskinesia, allowing a reduction in drug dosage and related adverse effects. So this is an article I'm going to send out. This is one that is available free full text. It's going to go out. So I'll probably send a couple of the videos in tomorrow's email and then a couple of the videos on Thursday. This one will go out on Thursday, the video that I did about this study. And then I will also send the link that you can download this article if you want to take it to your neurologist and say, I know this is a small study, but I think it's important for you to know that this is possible if you weren't already familiar with this research. Because I think this is a really big deal. Anyone who's really bothered by dyskinesias, in many cases, they're being recommended to have deep brain stimulation surgery, which is totally a viable option. But people should be told what their different options are. Do you want to do an exercise intensive and see if that is effective for you? Do you want to get DBS? Honestly, both might be the best. Do an exercise intensive, get in the best shape possible, decrease your medication, see how good you can feel. And then if deep brain stimulation is still a good option for you, go ahead and do it. You're just going to have a better outcome if you're in better shape going into that surgery. And then you're going to have, better outcome afterwards. So this is something that should be given as an option to people. And there are some people where DBS is not a good option for them, depending on, different situations. There's, criteria that kind of determine whether someone's a good candidate or not. And in some cases, some people are not a great candidate for DBS and may not benefit that much, in which case this is a non, surgical option that should be tried. So we have to say, okay, what was this intensive though? So the intervention, it was a 4-week intervention that entailed 3 daily sessions. So 2 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. So it's 3 hours a day, 5 days a week for a month, which is a lot. It sounds like a lot, but if you think about your life, and if 1 month could make this big of a difference, maybe committing for 1 month is worth it. So yeah, they did 5 days a week. So the global duration of each session, including recovery periods, was about 1 hour. The first session comprised of cardiovascular warm-up activities, relaxation exercises, muscle stretching exercises, exercises to improve range of motion, exercises to improve the functionality of the abdominal muscles, and postural changes in the supine position. So, this sounds like some cardiovascular warm-up, and then relaxation and all these exercises. It sounds a lot like a power moves class to me, with some specific stretching. So, maybe a flexibility week. The second session comprised exercises to improve balance and gait using a stabilometric platform with a visual cue. So I'm not really familiar with exactly what this is. because it's different than like our slip trip trainer. It sounds more high tech. And then a treadmill. The treadmill training had visual and auditory cues. So basically more walking and balance. So this is like functional mobility, cardiovascular, walking and balance. The last session of occupational therapy aimed at improving autonomy of daily livings, transferring some from sitting to standing, rolling, position, from supine to sitting, from sitting to supine, dressing, exercises to improve hand functionality and skills. And then moreover, patients spent an additional 20 minutes each day in front of the mirror in order to control involuntary and exaggerated movements. So that's interesting. That's not really something I've heard administered in terms of treatment. I think when people are having dyskinesia, sometimes really trying to control it can make it stronger. But with this being used in this study, this is now something that I'm going to recommend to people. And I think the more they're doing good exercise here, like from previous studies, we know that when you do aerobic exercise, it really primes your brain for neuroplasticity and learning. So I think that doing some of this training in front of a mirror, controlling your movements, is going to be more successful when you have done these other forms of exercise. So what they talk about in terms of the success, why people got better. So they said for one, they improved probably their absorption of medication. They improved in some neuroplastic ways and were able to take less medication and therefore experience less dyskinesia. But also they said they were able to help people shift the ratio. When people are experiencing a lot of dyskinesia, they're maybe spending more time with movements that aren't really controlled and less time where they're really in control of their movement. So by doing this training of all the different things where they're in control, they're shifting the ratio so that people have more time that they're in control and less time that they're out of control. And so that actually is its own type of neuroplastic, motor control changing at a really high level. So that was really cool to hear about. And then I thought there was one other thing about it. Can't remember. Yeah, I guess that's basically it. Those are the two things, being able to have an impact on medication and then also being able to have an impact and improve control of movements. Those two things together meant that people had significant improvement. So if you're someone who's experiencing dyskinesia or experiencing motor fluctuations, maybe not even with dyskinesia, but you just feel better at times and worse at times, you could say, hey, I'm going to do an exercise intensive for 1 month. I'm really going to commit to more than what I normally do. Usually I exercise 1 hour a day, maybe sometimes 2, but I also miss some days. You could say, okay, for a month, I'm really going to dedicate my time and effort to this. And you can plan this out. You can say, okay, it's summer. I'm not doing it now. I have traveling. I'm spending time with family. My grandkids are off school. So summertime may not be the right time to do it. It might be that you pick a month in the fall and you look at your schedule and you actually map it out and dedicate your time to do this. And then basically it would be, a cardio class, a power moves class, or HIIT, some combination between the three of those. I would say ideally one is high intensity and one is more moderate intensity. So high intensity would be cardio or HIIT or boxing. And then power moves or functional strength would be a more moderate intensity one. Those could be live or recorded classes. And then for your third hour of occupational therapy, for one, you could actually access some individual therapy during this time. So an intensive like this could happen just online. It could happen partially online with our classes and partially in person with a physical or occupational therapist or speech therapist in your area. And it's never going to be the same as working with a physical or occupational therapist if you do it on your own. But if this last session, you're like, okay, I just want to work on functional things. I'm not going to go in and work with an occupational therapist. I'm going to do it on my own. Then you could basically write a list of, what are the things that I do throughout the day? I move around in bed, I get up, I get dressed. And so you would spend an hour dedicated to practicing doing those things really well, practicing fine motor activities. You could get things accomplished during that time. So I think this is something that you could do somewhat on your own. You could do it in combination with working with a professional. Some people might feel like, okay, I really need to do this whole thing with supervision. And so then you try to figure out how to make that happen. That's going to be a little bit trickier with, how insurance pays for individual therapy. there probably are not very many places that do intensives like this with this amount of time, but you could see what is available. I know like in Arizona, there's a place doing 2-week intensives. So that at least would be 2 weeks of working with someone, and then maybe you do another 2 weeks on your own. So there's just a lot of ways this could be put together. And this is the kind of thing that if you are thinking about doing something like this, if you want to let me know, ask any questions, if you feel like you need any help designing or picking what things to work on, I'd be happy to do that. But I just think it is extremely exciting that in one, like when you think about, yes, 3 hours a day, 5 days a week for a month is a lot. When you think about in the grand scheme of your life to commit yourself, being that dedicated and how much of an impact it can be, I think it's pretty cool. And then of course, you still want to be exercising the rest of the time, but it, can be kind of the normal amount. That's what this group, after doing this intensive, was recommended to keep exercising, keep doing things, but it wasn't anything that was super structured or, recorded or anything. But if you do think about if you're doing kind of a mini intensive all the time, 1 to 2 hours of exercise a day, you could also experience these kinds of benefits and probably even to a greater degree if you're doing this over the long term. So I find this super motivating and exciting. This article was published in like 2015. Like this is 10 years old as well, but it is not the standard of practice. I don't think many physical therapists, neurologists, people with Parkinson's know that this is an option and that, research like this has been published and has been very successful. So yeah, I'm very motivated for some people maybe to try doing more of an intensive. All right. So moving along, important dates for June. So we will be closed this Friday for July 4th. That's our only closure for this month. So far, the online educational meeting that we have, oops, that's not the correct date, is July 15th. And this is part of the webinar series that I'm doing for Rogue in Motion that basically is kind of marketing for the online membership. So these are webinars that I'm doing that are open and available for the public to join. They can watch previous recorded videos, and then our members are welcome to join. I am debating a little bit about having an additional educational meeting this month, which is kind of what I've been doing for a few months. I just did bone health yesterday. I'm hoping more people will watch that because there's some really good information in there. And then July seems like kind of a busy month with some people traveling. I don't have a specific topic or a speaker available right now. So TBD, I did reach out. One of our online members who he did live in North Carolina. I'm not sure if that's still where he's living because I think he is retired from his university position. But he wrote an article in the fall about exercise, exerkines, and neuroplasticity. And so I have emailed him to see if he would come on and talk about that article that's really recently published. So we'll see what he says. So if he's available, I might add that to the schedule. I think both hearing about the research is always exciting. And then the fact that it's someone with Parkinson's who's writing and doing reviews like that is also extra cool. So TBD, but otherwise we'll have at least this one, and summer might be a little bit light since people are busy. Our in-person women's group, I've checked in and sent an email out, and a lot of people are traveling. So we are going to take a break for the summer. Our next in-person women's meeting will be Friday, October 10th. We are going to start a book club. There has been interest. And so I know we've been talking about this for a long time. I finally have a survey ready that I'm going to send out in the next few days. And the first step is basically to kind of have people put books that they would like to read, whether it's a book that you have read before and you would like to reread and discuss as part of a book club, or a new book that you want to read. So we're going to have people submit ideas for books and then also kind of talk about what genres we might want to cover. Once we have some ideas for books, we're going to send out a second survey where we will vote and pick a book. And then we will also vote and pick on the day and time that we're going to meet. So I have to look at our schedule, give us, a good 3 to 5 options for when we could meet. So that is, I promise it is being worked on. We have made progress since last week. So look out for that in the daily email. That'll be coming soon. Our online class schedule updates. So I have talked about this last month and then sent out an email kind of checking in, making sure it wasn't going to mess up anybody's schedule. But the changes, so we have had a request for a while that we switch on the days, Wednesdays and Fridays, that we have 3 classes in a row. There's your intensive right there. that we switch so that the moderate intensity class is in the middle of the two high intensity classes like we have on Mondays. So it just took me a little while in terms of kind of staffing in the schedule to make that happen. But as of, won't happen this Friday since we're closed, but next Friday, it's starting this month, we are switching. And so the Power Moves is with me is going to be at 8 a.m. now. We'll do the 30 minutes and 15-minute class. And then HIIT will be at 9 a.m. The difference with HIIT is that it's not just going to be a regular HIIT class anymore. It's going to be a strength-focused HIIT class, which basically means that the format is the same. We'll do a warm-up. We'll have 2 high-intensity exercises, 5 skilled exercises. Those high-intensity exercises will be similar as they have been. With Kate teaching this class, I have let her know that, my goal is that there always is something that is jumping or hopping, but has a stepping version. In case jumping isn't right for the person, but especially with the bone health talk that I did yesterday, that high impact exercise is one of the best things we can do to actually improve our bone density. So I really like that being an option in classes. And then the 5 skilled exercises are all going to be strength training exercises. So I wanted to have a second time in the week that we were really focusing on strength in addition to the functional strength training class. So the 5 skilled exercises will be strength. Some of them might be the same as in functional strength training. Some might be different. We might do weeks where we focus on like leg strength or arm strength or core strength. So I think it's going to be a really good class, and I'm excited for that to get started. Because of switching those 2, I also decided to switch the Thursday class and flip those as well, because I like having kind of a distribution of having some power moves at 8 a.m. and some power moves at 9 a.m. So starting this week on Thursdays, power moves will be the 8 a.m. Pacific time class, 11 a.m. Eastern time, and power moves will be the 9 a.m., 12 p.m. class. So yeah, and then once the functional strength training class finishes the 8-week series, which will be in July. I think that's on my next slide. I won't get ahead of myself. So on July 23rd, the current 8-week series of functional strength training will have wrapped up. And we are then going to also switch functional strength training and cardio. So we will now have cardio and HIIT at the 7 a.m. time. We'll have some power moves and some high intensity with boxing at the 8 a.m., 11 a.m. time, and then we'll have some HIIT, power moves, cardio. So a little bit better distribution. And for anyone who is doing 2 classes on any given day, there's the option of doing a high intensity and a moderate intensity back to back, whether it's the first 2 or the second and third class. So that'll work out on all the days of the week. So I'm very excited about that. So it's been a long time coming, but it's all going to happen this month, and we'll get used to our new schedule. Then questions. So one is, with staffing, and potentially we are starting to have a few more staff, and Jamie will be coming back. Kate has joined the team. And then we ideally are going to be hiring one more person to kind of, that seems like that's going to be like the sweet spot for the size of our team. So I'm looking and thinking, if there are people who want to work the early times, would we potentially add another class in at the 7/10 a.m. time on Tuesdays and Thursdays? So one question I have is, are there people who would be interested in those time frames and would like to have live classes at those times? So I'll send out in an email. You guys can think about it and let me know if those are, times that work well for you and you anticipate that you would want to do classes at that time. Let me know. I'll send that question in an email. Here at Rogue, we are thinking about adding one new different type of class. So this is inspired from a couple different things. Doing our breath work was great. We had meditation as our exercise of the month for a period of time. We got a lot of good feedback about that. And even just last week, for my Power Moves class on Friday, with it being flexibility week, I really slowed things down and focused on stretching, and it felt so good. We have had a request for a stretch class here in person at Rogue, and we kind of thought like, well, isn't that Power Moves? But no, Power Moves is moderate intensity. It is not a chill, relaxing type of stretch class. And so we're thinking about adding a class like this in person. And then I thought, if we're adding that in person, we might add a class like this online as well. So it would be a combination of doing some meditation, some breath work, some stretching and movement. So we would still be getting into different positions, but it would be at a lower position than like, the power moves class moves at a clip. Like we get a lot of repetitions in, a lot of different positions, a lot of different exercises. It's not a chill class in most cases. So I'm also interested if people are interested in classes like that. If we did it, that where we have kind of the most opportunity for openings is the Tuesday and Thursday morning. We could always add a class here later, but I think, especially since we have so many people on East Coast time, I don't want to get too late in the day. So I think we would fill these slots, whether we do that stretch meditate class in this actual time frame. I think what we probably would do is we would do the stretch meditate class at 7 a.m., 10 a.m. one of the days. And I think on the other day, I would move power moves before. So we'd have one day that power moves was early, and then we'd have the stretch and meditate after. So it'd still be kind of moderate intensity to high intensity and moderate or low. So there still would be kind of a good combo for the day if you were doing 2 back to back, and a good distribution where there was a power moves class at this time and then the stretch and meditate at the later time. So just things to be thinking about. I will send in one of the emails, probably next week, I'll send out a question for that. So you can either respond to that email, or if you have something in mind from today before even I send that email out and you want to send me an email saying, yes, I would, totally be up for doing some other earlier classes. And that other class you talked about sounds good. Feel free to let me know. This month's in-person meetings, we have a support group today for our members with Parkinson's. Next week is the one for spouses and partners. And then the 15th is for everyone. We have reactive balance training and athletic falls training. We have availability for it again. Now that Kate has joined the team, we have a little more open time in our schedule. So for any in-person members who want to schedule that, let us know. Future meetings. So we'll do meditation and mindfulness this month. I have requests out to a few different doctors. There is a gastroenterologist up in Pasadena who specializes in neurologic conditions. So he's a GI doctor, but specializes working with people who have neurologic conditions. And then same thing, there is a urologist here in Orange County who specializes in neuro. So they are both people. I've reached out to this guy, haven't heard back yet. I'm also going to reach out to this doctor, it's a woman, and have them come and present. So I've got some topics, but it's just a matter for certain topics. I really, certain topics I can put together and present myself. Certain topics I really want to have a guest speaker come in. And so it's just a matter of getting a hold of people and scheduling and, having availability. And everyone these days is just really, really busy. So I'm working on it. So as those are available, I will get those scheduled, but just so you know, I'm working on it. And then I am open for any other questions, requests, or discussion. So I'm going to stop the recording. For anyone who watched the recording, if you have any thoughts, questions, send me an email at claire@roguept.com. And thank you for your time.